We'll be kicking off this webinar really shortly. Thanks so much to all of you who've been hanging in there listening to me saying that many times over. All right, welcome to everybody who's just getting ready, and lovely to see so many of you on video. Really appreciate it. It's so nice to see your faces. So a big warm welcome this evening. All right. So if anyone still has an option to complete a poll on their screen, it would be lovely if you could complete that poll. That's really nice just for us to get a sense of everybody who's in the room. Thanks so much to all of those who I can see have completed it already. And Rob, if you get the moment to, actually, it might be nice if you could share the results of the poll so we can all see who is in the virtual room with us right now. All right, fabulous. Brilliant. Okay, so I think it's your last chance to vote in the opening poll, just so that we can see everybody who we've currently got with us on the call. But thanks so much to everybody who has already done that. Rob might be able to share the results of that with us now. And then I think I'll be handing over to Beth to help us kick off and get this evening started. All right, so the results are in. This shows you who you're in the room with and where we're all at on our journey. So we were just asking everybody, for you, for the organisation you work with or perhaps work most closely with, what stage are you at in your journey to climate action? It looks like the majority of people in the room have made some progress. I'm pleased that there are 11% who are the experts who have nailed it already and are just here to share their great wisdom. So I'm really looking forward to hearing everything that they've learned, and we'll have some opportunities for that in the breakout sessions later. So brilliant. Okay, thanks so much for sharing that, Rob. And if you're nowhere and you haven't engaged yet, you've come to the right place. So welcome. Over to you, Beth.
Thank you, Charlotte. And thank you everybody for joining us. It's really fantastic to see so many people here. My name's Beth. I work at OnPurpose, and we are really excited at OnPurpose to be hosting this climate emergency workshop with you all this evening. OnPurpose declared a climate emergency back in January, and when we declared, one of our commitments was to spread the word among our community about the importance of climate action, and I think that's what we're doing this evening. So it's really great that all of you guys are involved, and that you can hopefully take what you learn tonight and go back to your organisations and spread the word there and further afield. We are co-hosted tonight by Actionable, and Actionable are one of our cohorts projects. So Actionable are all about running events where you take a conversation about a social or an environmental issue and you transform that into tangible and meaningful action, which is exactly what we're hoping to do again tonight. And we are really, really happy to have Business Declares with us to run the workshop. Business Declares are a fantastic organisation who have supported and continue to support lots of different businesses and organisations to declare a climate emergency and then to turn that declaration into action and to support those businesses in reaching carbon neutrality. They support a wide range of organisations, but there's some big names among the people who they've worked with. So just to pick out a few, they've worked with Body Shop, they've worked with Pukka, and they've worked with Bateswells. So it is really great to have you guys here tonight, and I'm looking forward to learning from you all. So thank you for joining us, and I'll hand back over to you now, Charlotte.
Thanks so much, Beth, and thanks for such a lovely welcome. Really great to be able to host this webinar and have so many of you with us. So thanks so much for people who've just logged on. I just wanted to be your host at this moment and say, make yourselves comfortable in your own homes. And I hope you've got something nice and refreshing to drink while you spend the evening with us. also perhaps to make yourselves at home virtually. So for those of you who are not incredibly used to working on Zoom all the time, I was just going to point out a couple of things it might be worth being conscious of tonight. So we've got the chat option in the toolbar, usually on the bottom of your screen. I can see a lot of people have already said hi on there. Thanks very much. Do just test that that's working, because that will be a really useful tool for you to ask questions and to contribute later. Another thing that will be great if you could just test, and I'd love you all to play with me now and trying to do that, is if you use the participants option on your toolbar, you should have an option there to raise your hand, and anyone who's able to, who could just raise their hand to show me that it's working for them, that would be great, because I think we're going to be using that in the Q&A section later. So thanks so much to all of you who are able just to raise your hand. Oh, brilliant. I can see it's working for so many people. So brilliant. Thanks so much. That's great. So we'll be using that later. And I wonder if all of you are going to have your hands up later. That would be great. The last thing to say, which is a slightly more techie one, which Fiona's going to get you using in a moment, is at the very top of your screen, next to where it says that we are seeing somebody else's screen in green, there should be a little drop down that says view options, and in that drop down there should be an option to choose annotate, and there's going to be a moment in a minute just to start editing a slide. So if you know how to annotate, get that ready, because we'll be doing that later. Excellent. Okay, I think that is all the important sort of health and safety notices that I need to go through. Luckily, I don't need to tell you where the fire exit is tonight. What I will say is that we're going to try and end by 5 to 8 UK time latest, just so that we can respect the 8 PM NHS clap for all the people who'd like to take part in that. And now I'm just going to quickly talk you through the agenda to give you a sense of what to look forward to tonight. So we are kicking off with a little bit of context of what Business Declares is, what the mission is, and especially what that looks like in light of the current pandemic. We'll also be talking you through what declaring a climate emergency is all about. Then we're going to hear from a couple of people representing our Business Declares community. So a big hello to Benita, if you want to wave, Benita, who's going to, thank you, who's going to be telling the story of Whole Grain Digital. And then we're also going to be breaking out into some discussion groups later. So there'll be a really nice moment at that point where we're going to split into 6 groups, and we'll all be able to focus on a really specific question, and I hope just have a really rich discussion. And then we'll be closing by hearing from an organisation called Make My Money Matter, who are also going to talk about some specific actions that you can take. And there'll be a moment before the end of the session to log everything you've learned, and really just have a moment to think about one action you'd like to take, so that we can convert all this good thinking into tangible steps. So a big welcome and thank you so much for joining us. It's brilliant to see the appetite and the energy around this issue. All right, so I'm going to hand over to Fiona.
Well, thank you very much, Charlotte. I'm Fiona Ellis. I'm one of the founders and the directors of Business Declares, which was launched last year in September in response to an amazing year around climate protest on a global scale. And of course, we're now having a very different 2020 to the one we thought we might be having, where we could work on the climate emergency.
Hi, it's Ben. Sorry I'm late.
Great to have you with us, Ben. That's great. And what we are focusing on now is how can we, in this interactive process, and I'd love to get us engaged, and we will be having those breakouts later, how can we think about what do we do around declaring a climate emergency now and in the light of COVID-19, which we're very aware is really meaning that some organisations are finding it hard to stay afloat, and many have been very distracted. And also, I'm so glad to see so many of you here though. So our first question, if we move to the next slide, was a little bit similar to the poll, but we'll give you the chance to play with the screen, those of you who are on laptop. So if you go to, as Ellie was just saying, and I think for this we need to mute, so perhaps mute everyone, but we'll just interact on the screen. So if you go to view options, you can find annotate, and in that process you can find fourth along is something called a stamp. So I'm just going to put my arrow on stamp as to where an organisation that I'm working with is at the moment, in that they've declared and want to finalise their plan. And I'd just love to see 50 arrows coming up on there to see whether where you are at level 1 of being interested, whether you started to do that. So love to see arrows, hearts, anything coming along. Some people are getting creative. Great. So we do have a few people who are in the area of having declared and wanting to finalise their plan. And I can see OnPurpose is in that place, of course, and now engaging wider. That gives us a sense of where we are. And I think we'll be able to share more about engaging people and how we engage suppliers even in our conversations as when we go into breakouts. So if we move on from that, we might need to clear all the drawings or they'll stay with us. And if we move on to the next slide, I'd really just like now to give a couple of minutes to Tom Ebbott as the Managing Director of OnPurpose, just to say a little bit about why you declared a climate emergency.
Thanks, Fiona. And first, to say it's great to have so many people with us here tonight. Thank you all for making the time to join. I think many of you are already part of the OnPurpose community, but for those who don't know us well, we exist to help people and organisations create a world that works for all within planetary boundaries. And we're best known for doing that through our associate programme, which helps you transition your career into more purposeful work. And I know that a number of people on the video call tonight who've either been through that programme or on at the moment. It's great to see you all this evening. In terms of OnPurpose's declaration, so in terms of the why, as an organisation, as you've just heard, the environment and the climate is core to our mission. We want organisations to operate, and we want us as a society to operate within planetary boundaries, and that includes us as OnPurpose. And I think for us also the declaring a climate emergency was very much about practicing what you preach. So we're talking to all of our stakeholders about this. We want to be part of this movement and sort of trying to set an example and be part of travelling with others on this. Sort of briefly about how we did it. So Beth already mentioned earlier, our public declaration was in January this year, and we and not just saying this was on the call this evening, but we used the climate climate emergency playbook, which was produced by B-Lab and Business Declares, which I think I would encourage everyone to take a look at that. I think it's a really good guide to getting you to think about this and to working through the different steps. So I guess the steps we went through were a version of that. We as a team talked. We're a relatively small team based across 3 cities. So we had conversations about why it was important, about where different people were at with thinking about the climate emergency and engaging with it and wanting to take action. We engaged with our board, and the board, and the key thing, as the playbook shows, is to declare, is to adopt the declaration. We did that in September 2019, and then the external declaration in January 2020. And we now have ongoing action around a working group within the organisation. I think that's the key thing, is to make sure you're not just making the declaration, but you have ongoing action embedded as well.
Fabulous.
No, I'd certainly agree with that. Thank you, Tom. And I quickly would just like to move on to the next slide to give a sense of what we've been discussing over the last few weeks. Like everyone, everyone finding themselves in this unprecedented situation around COVID-19, but one that was forecast to happen and has now happened. And one of the things that we've been talking with our declared companies, we held a dialogue session, and this statement came out of that. So you may have seen it. So I just wanted to touch on the fact that I think it underlines that we recognise that this, I love the fact you were talking about planetary boundaries, that this is a planetary emergency, and that it's very connected to the climate and nature emergencies that we're also in, which may seem to have a slower burn, but are very much ticking time bombs of their own. And the choices that our governments make now need to be about building back better. And so we've very much been supporting those companies who have launched a green recovery plan, things that you've seen. And we've also signed the Planetary Emergency Partnership Letter, which was initiated by the Club of Rome. So I think what it means is that we commit to tell the truth, which was our initial statement, but now as at a planetary level, that there is a health emergency as well as the climate and ecological emergency. So I'd love to have more discussions as we go on about that in the various groupings. But I think at the moment I'd hand back to Charlotte just for some examples of what we're noticing and perhaps what you're noticing around climate action in this time.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Fiona. And just a big warm welcome to anyone who has joined us since we officially got started. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. So as we get going into the meat of the session tonight, I guess a really big question that I'd love to be asking the room, and I really welcome your thoughts on the chat at the moment, if you are happy to type them there, is just, have you heard of any effective action that you have seen organisations taking during the pandemic? So I'm going to talk through a couple of my examples of things that I've seen that have been for me signals of change or signs of hope, or perhaps examples of things to try and emulate. And I just wanted to point out, thanks so much to Tom for telling the story of everything that OnPurpose have done to declare. You might have seen in the chat that when Tom referenced the playbook, which is full of examples and ideas, that Rob was able to link to that in the chat. So if that's useful and you want to visit that another time, do copy and paste that link. All right, so yeah, we're just going to have a little moment now where we all share some ideas of any examples of things that we have seen. And if Ellie just moves us to the next slide, I'm just going to talk through a couple of my signals of change. Cheers, Ellie. So these are probably ones that some of you have seen before, and I think that they're interesting. So one of them is that we saw a supermarket chain in the UK, Ocado, take the call that it wanted to ban the sales of bottled water during the time of COVID-19, and that was really just to focus on making sure that essential supplies were taking precedence, but great interesting move there. Another one, I guess a few of you will have seen that Milan recently took the announcement as a city that as part of its kind of reset, it wants to start by only welcoming pedestrians and cyclists to some of its city centre. Again, a really interesting response to having noticed the difference that the lack of pollution has made on that city. We're also seeing a real change in terms of ESG investing taking greater prominence during the downturn. So I'm just really interested to hear ideas. It might be from within your own organisation, things that you've been doing to act on climate change and climate action during this time, or it might be signals of change that you have seen elsewhere. So yeah, lovely to see a couple of examples coming through. So we've got people talking about temporary cycling lanes. We've also got some examples of the academic community. Yeah, really nice. And I think some of the themes coming up there are around messaging. So I've definitely seen a lot of brands pointing to how this planetary situation that we're facing, the global pandemic, actually taps into the broader issues that are going to be raised by climate change in the future. Yeah, lovely one from Mayor here, that Transport Action Network is crowdfunding to take the Department for Transport to court over their road building strategy. Yep, green recovery in London. Yeah, and then the big decision by Amsterdam, that's a great one, that it's taking on the donor economics model as it looks to recover. So yeah, these are just some really nice examples about thinking, okay, obviously globally we are in this strange moment that, although perhaps could have been predicted, a lot of people were not expecting. And it's kind of, how do we hold the tension of addressing the real and tragic needs of the current pandemic while also keeping an eye on the future and the climate emergency and the implications of that to some of the very same issues that we're battling today with human safety and health. So thank you so much for all of your comments there. And if you have more ideas of signals of change and examples of hope, then please do share them as the session goes on. All right, so I'm going to hand over to Ellie shortly. And as I do that, I'm going to ask Rob to just launch the second poll if he's able to. So no problems if you can't answer this, but this is just a real opportunity for you to share what you'd like to get out of the session tonight. And then I'm going to hand over to Ellie, who works with me as a volunteer. So Ellie and I are both volunteers supporting the Business Declares team. And Ellie's going to talk a little bit about the steps to declare. So welcome, Ellie.
Super. Thank you, Charlotte. Hi, everyone. It's so great to see so many of you on the end of a very sunny day. So my name is Ellie Austin. I'm a sustainability consultant, and I work with a few companies to help them take action on climate change, including Packer, who we've heard mentioned a couple of times already. So I've been volunteering my time to the Business Declares Network for a while now because I think it's such an important initiative. It's a fantastic way of bringing together all of these really kind of thought-leading companies who are trying to build momentum to show leadership on climate change. And I just wanted to kind of take a moment here to just pause and explain exactly what we're talking about when we say organisations are declaring a climate and ecological emergency. I think particularly for those of you who are perhaps a bit newer in this area or on your journey, I thought it'd be helpful just to outline exactly what those steps are. So here on this slide, you can see what Business Declares asks companies to commit to in terms of declaring a climate and ecological emergency. So it essentially involves committing to make a public declaration that's signed off by your board that you're going to take urgent action on climate change. It's about committing to develop a climate emergency plan, and that includes a commitment to reach net zero that's aligned with the Paris Agreement to keep global warming within 1.5 degrees, and that you also have specific milestones and interim targets along the way. And we also ask organisations to commit to sharing their knowledge and sharing their kind of best practices and like coming together with other organisations to advocate for change more widely. Those are the kind of specific things that organisations are committing to, and we've heard already from OnPurpose, and we're going to hear from some other organisations as well about what they've done. So I'm just going to briefly talk you through some of the specific steps that you can take to declare a climate and ecological emergency. And kind of exactly what this looks like will look different for every organisation, but I thought it was helpful just to give you a quick tour of some of these practical steps. And I just wanted to flag as well that we've got a document called Steps to Declare available on our website, and I think it's just been linked to in the chat, which gives you a lot more detail on what I'm about to just give you a really quick tour of. And we've also had the B-Lab playbook being mentioned as well, which is a fantastic, really detailed document that gives case studies about organisations who've declared as well. So the first step to declare is about building stakeholder support. So this is about finding people both inside and outside of your organisation that are going to be your kind of allies as you work out your operational response to the climate and ecological emergency, and obviously in the times that we're in now, also the health and economic crises that we face. And that could be about including people from key functions across the business, so like HR or manufacturing, and working with others as well, like your suppliers or your customers, to try and build a plan to take action. The second step is to get your board to agree to declare and obviously make the public declaration. So that's very much about, not just making a kind of one-off statement that you file away and that is an internal thing. It's very much about making a public commitment to action and to report your progress. And we actually have a kind of template for the declaration for the wording on our website. So you can go to Business Declare's website and you'll be able to see some example declaration you can use, and also see the declarations that other companies have made as they've done this already. Okay, so the third step is to develop your climate emergency plan, and this is about really putting down on paper your long-term aspirations and the specific goals and targets that you're going to take on climate action. And we're going to be looking at this in a bit more detail in our discussion today, and in some of the group discussions that we'll be having. And we'll also obviously hear more from some of the organisations, so from Benita and from Ben later, about specifically what they've been doing in their organisations. The fourth step is to engage your staff on climate action. So I know we've kind of seen the world of work be pretty much turned upside down recently. And I think as we're coming through this time, we'll need to find ways to help staff understand your climate action plans, encourage them to change behaviours or perhaps continue some of the behaviour changes that we've seen recently around working from home and commuting and things like that. And it might also be about offering training to help your staff integrate their climate agenda into their everyday work. The fifth step is about advocating for change outside of your organisation. So this is about being part of wider networks, about pushing for action on climate with your suppliers, your customers, your peers, being part of organisations like Business Declares or other communities of leading companies. And it might be about things like allowing staff to go on climate strikes or using your kind of leverage as an organisation to influence policymakers. And then finally, the sixth step is to monitor and embed climate action. This is about having the right governance structures in place, about incentivising your staff, and also reporting on your progress transparently. So that's a kind of super quick tour of some of the specific steps you can take to declare. And I'm really excited to be able to hand over to Benita now from Whole Grain Digital, and she's going to be able to explain more about what that actually looks like in practice in an organisation.
Awesome, thank you, Ellie. So a really big welcome to Benita now from Whole Grain Digital. Benita, you're just going to have to imagine a room of applause as you begin, especially now that we've just heard all the phenomenal work you have to do to go into declaring. So I've really asked Benita to come along tonight so she can talk to us about what declaring meant to her organisation and also her own reflections of the importance of climate action in the wake of COVID-19. So welcome, Benita.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm going to fumble through my presentation, but I'll just say slide change when I need the slide to be changed. And a fantastic pixie here will help me. Thank you. I'm Benita. I'm from Whole Grain Digital. We're a web design agency. On the surface, it sounds like yet another normal business that does web design, but the way the reason we exist is to use design as a force for good. So we only work with ethical clients, we work with positive businesses and charities to create fast websites that are easy to navigate. Now, we started this business with the intention of using the force for good, which meant that every action that we took, that my husband, Tom, who's a sustainability nut, and me, anything that we could do, we have tried to do right from 2007. So most of the actions that I will go on about will be on our About Us page, which I'll paste a link for in a minute. We're very proud of what we've achieved, especially to become creative leaders in how to create a low carbon model. That is something really important to us, but we can't stop there. So I'd like to jump to the next slide because that is where I was going to talk about. So we haven't waited. We haven't waited for somebody else to make a difference and then follow suit, or waited for somebody to come up with an idea. It's about constantly reinventing, constantly thinking of new ways to decarbonize our economy or decarbonize our business, our actions, make the business more efficient. And it's about not stopping. Even if it looks like, oh, you've achieved everything, there's always something more you can do. So it's about not stopping. And declaring climate emergency was a way of vocalizing all of the actions, the positive actions that we're taking as a business. And we are a very, very small business. So if we can do it, anybody can do it. Shall we go on to the next slide as well, please? So I would like to show how we bring it into our business, as in how we get other clients, as in clients who are not necessarily eco-minded, to join in with our intention of greening the internet. So we try to join up their intentions of whatever they have as a incentive, for example, better conversions or faster website or improved SEO. All of these are tied back into our sustainability initiatives. For example, faster website means it will have to be a smaller website. It will have to load quickly. It will have to load better on public transport where you're using your mobile internet, or in a foreign country when you're traveling, or on a foreign mobile where bandwidth is not as cheap as it is in the UK. So it's about improving user experience and so on. And it's about tying and looking for a win-win. And that's how you can convince a client. So it's not always as straightforward as saying, we're a green agency, so work with us. Because there's always more that the client wants beyond just being a green agency. I'd like to show you some examples. I'd like to talk you through some examples that we have done as a business. One of them is in incentivizing our team members to switch to renewable energy at home. It sounds like an easy task, but it has taken us 3 years. And trust me, our team is very positive minded, but not all of them own their own homes. So some of them had to convince their landlords and so on. The first incentive we gave was an extra holiday a year if you swap to renewable energy at home. We thought that was working okay, but the uptake wasn't great. So one of our team members switched to Bulb, which is a B Corp, certified B Corp, and they hand out a £50 voucher if you pass on your referral code. So one of our team members signed up for Bulb. The next one got a £50 voucher when they signed up for. So you both get it. The switcher and the switchee gets the £50. And to be honest, the day off didn't do the trick like the £50 voucher did. So by last week, we've now got 100% of the team on renewable energy, and it's taken 3 years, but it's a long time coming, and it has happened at the right time now that everybody's working from home. They're working on renewable energy. The other thing we did probably is not as relevant at the moment, like climate perks, but we offer an extra holiday on either side of the holiday for your personal travel. If you travel by land instead of traveling by air. So that encourages people to travel by train, explore the opportunity to travel by their car in their own comfort, and then share tips within the team. We also incentivize the team to use city cycles and then pay for the extra passes that we need to issue for those. There's other policies we've introduced, like vegetarian food coupons and so on, and no-fly policy. But it's all on our About Us page, which I'll paste as soon as I finish talking. Could we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So tying it back into COVID-19 situation, as we all do, I really care about my friends and family, and it's been with all of this happening around me, I've become more aware of how vulnerable we are, not just as a species, but we're just as a society, we're very vulnerable, but not just as species. So it has become very transparent and very visible of who needs help and how much. And that has meant that these 3 actions that I talked right at the beginning about, which is not stopping improving, becoming proactive, not waiting for somebody else to do something positive and then copying, but actually initiating it. So that's the not waiting bit. Not stopping, which is once you've got to a point and thinking, oh wow, we have now become carbon positive. Well, you're still emitting carbon. So just find ways of reducing your carbon emissions, but also compensating for the ones you're emitting right now. So that's what we talk about, regenerative business. I'll paste a link for that as well in a minute. And then the third one being vocalizing your positive actions. Join seminars like this, talk to your friends, talk to your family. Yes, you will be that greeny hippie, but it's okay. You've got to push for what's right, and therefore vocalizing positive actions is so important. I think I've gone just under my 5 minutes.
Perfect.
So I'll paste my links and I'll let you guys get on.
Oh, thank you so much, Vanita. It was really wonderful to hear from you. And as I think you probably got a bit of a flavour of, there are a wealth of examples that Vanita could have chosen of the amazing work that Wholegrade have done. And actually, Rob, who works for Business Declares, has put together some mini case studies, which I think Ellie will be able to show you. This is a sneak preview, which start to bring to life some of the amazing work that different organisations in our network have done. This is one that we'll be able to share with you after the call if you just didn't get enough of Vanita and all of the brilliant things she's up to. And do definitely follow her links, as you'd expect from a digital agency. Their website is really easy to use and it gives you lots of brilliant examples. Okay, so hearing from one organisation with 12 staff, I think Wholegrain have, we're now going to move over to Ben Tolhurst from JLL, who's coming from a very different context. There are many things that Ben could talk to us about. He has been an amazing supporter on the board of Business Declares. What I've asked him to use his 5 minutes for this evening is to really talk us through the story of engaging people inside your organisation. So Ben's done some brilliant work writing blogs, leading workshops, all sorts of things across his organisation. So I'm just going to hand over to Ben now, who can introduce himself and the job he does and talk to us specifically about his top tips for how to engage people in your organisation around the climate crisis. So over to you, Ben.
Hi guys, great to see everybody, and fantastic evening. So thank you. So my role is to run the property and asset management bit of JLL. I say bit, it's £100 million turnover with 1,300 staff working for all of the institutional investors who run pension and other funds, LNG, Aviva, Royal London, etc. I've worked in outsourcing all my life, and I've never had anything to do with sustainability. So I'm a sort of kind of strange for these kind of forums. But I did have an epiphany moment in February of last year, where I basically changed my entire life as a result. And the thing which I did was to do some research on climate change and the climate crisis. And really, once you know the truth, you can't put the genie back in a bottle. You can't look your daughter in the eye and say, oh, don't worry, you know, your future's safe here, and we just carry on as we're doing. You can't live in false consciousness, or at least I couldn't. So I underwent some kind of massive change, and in 8 months, I went fully vegan, plant-based diet. I decarbonized my pension and ISAs. I stopped buying stuff. I stopped flying. I worked out every single flight I've ever taken. I've set aside a chunk of money to do offsets. Offsets are not a good thing, by the way, but if you committed the crime, you may as well try and make up for it, but don't keep committing the crime. The first £1,000 went on trees in our village, by the way, which the council did a good job of trying to cut down, which was bizarre because they declared a climate emergency, but that's another story. In my work, I found a successor for my role. I went down to 4 days a week. I'm trying to get to 3 days a week, and I want to spend more time engaging people, raising awareness, and doing all of that. That's what happened in 8 months. That was the result of my epiphany. In terms of the engagement with people, so the epiphany got voiced in a blog. That blog just went to my immediate people, which says 1,300, but somehow or other it ended up going around the world, because JLL employ about 100,000 perhaps, and I got loads of responses that I just didn't think would ever happen. So I ended up creating a sort of virtual group of interested people. I then went to the UK board and said, this stuff is scary. You've all got kids. You need to take some bloody notice of this, and we need to do something as a firm. So we had some interesting meetings with the UK board on that, and that led me to create a CPD pack, which is a bit of a grand title for a set of slides that basically tell the truth, and then what sort of things we can do about them. I managed to get that through the company. I've rolled that out to about 1,000 people, either face-to-face or on WebEx, and therefore engaged people through a kind of formal CPD mechanism, through a more of an informal blog mechanism to get things started. But I think most importantly, as a role model, and perhaps an agitator, where you can legitimize the conversation. Because what was really interesting was everyone's got their corporate front, right, and it's not professional to show a bit of vulnerability or a bit of humanity or a bit of something else. And I'm just saying, look, guys, we're all individuals, right? We're all family members of some description. It's fine. It's fine to have these conversations. It's fine to have these worries. Let's talk about them. So on top of the kind of vocalizing, which was Vanita's points, and on top of the CPD stuff, we've had other sort of I guess more closed sessions where we've been talking about how people are feeling and what they might do about it, both from a personal or a professional area. So there's been loads of kind of ad hoc stuff, but also quite a lot of formal stuff around the CPD. And actually the CPDs, the climate, some of my clients found out about it, and I ended up doing the same thing to 100 global investors of one global company, and about 100 of another, who basically got to hear about it, and I got involved with their staff as well, and that's led me to get onto other networks. So for me, it's about authenticity. If you're not if you're a bit of a, if you're a bit of a sham on this and go, I want to tick the sustainability box, here we go, I'll say some pleasantries, then that people will see through that. If you can stand up and say, I have nothing to do with the meat and dairy industry whatsoever, I have as little to do with fossil fuels as my pension fund can be decarbonised as far as possible. I have chosen to not fly and spend my own personal money on offsets, and here's the money, and here's what I'm doing about it. If you can be that to a bunch of people in your organisation, and even if only 20% are inspired by you, they will go on and inspire others. So for me, it's about the grassroots authenticity, getting your messages across, but it's also about going in at the top, at the board level. And as a result, JLL are also, let's say not as a result, we've got a great team here anyway, but we're looking at decarbonising our pension funds. We've already stopped flying for anyone that can travel to their destination within 4.5 hours on the train, and there's loads more besides. So some of the personal things have also now melded into the business side, but the engagement thing for me is very, very simple. It's about authenticity. It's about genuine desire to do the right thing. It's about explaining why this stuff matters in a science-based but well articulated way, and then it's about listening and helping and supporting and empathy for those people that take this message on and then wonder what to do about it. We have to give them stuff they can start to do and make them feel part of it. And then finally, it's about legitimizing the conversation. It's okay to talk about this stuff when you are supposed to have your corporate facades. Just drop it and just be a human. So I'll pause. I'll stop there. I think I've done my time, and hand back to Ellie or Charlotte.
Thank you so much, Ben. That was fantastic. Cheers. So again, it seems very cruel to give people in this amazing network only 5 minutes to share what they've been up to. I don't know about you, but I feel exhausted just listening to Ben and everything he's able to achieve in such a short space of time. Please do share any questions that you have for Ben or Vanita on the chat. We now actually have an opportunity to ask some questions both to Ben and Vanita. I know we've also got some coming through to Fiona. So we're just going to have a little moment now for a Q&A session. So I'm going to ask Ellie to stop sharing her screen just so that we can all look at each other in the gallery view. So if you have that option, feel free. And if anyone who's already asked a question on the chat perhaps, or maybe who'd prefer to ask it aloud would like to raise their hand at this point, you might be able to get away with doing it physically, and I might be able to see some of you, but if you can use the functionality of raising your hand in the sort of participants bar, that would be fabulous. And yeah, I'm just going to open it up now to a short sequence of questions and answers. So I've got a really nice question, first of all, for Ben, which is about how do you approach conversations with people who disagree with you or don't see why the climate matters. So Ben, if you can give us a very quick one on that. I think you started something really nice there about like vulnerability and being human. Have you got any other tricks up your sleeve for when you're talking to people who perhaps don't see why the climate matters?
Yeah, so 3 things. Number 1, make it facts and science-based. You cannot argue with the facts unless you want to say that 192 scientists from IPCC are all wrong and everyone else around them is wrong, in which case, I'm not going to bother talking to you because you're a lost cause. So start with the facts. And the science, that's irrefutable, number 1. Number 2, make it personal. Make it personal, and not in a You know, I have had some criticism of being a little bit outspoken, but you know, if you've got kids, if you've got nieces, nephews, and even if you haven't got any of that, and you actually care about people, this is going to affect people you know and love big time, and it will happen in your lifetime. And if you don't care about any of that, then okay, you're a lost cause again. So number 2 is make it personal, and number 3, give people concrete things that they can actually do. And I'm not talking about recycling your straws every Wednesday. I'm talking about proper things like, you know, look into, consider adopting a near plant-based as you can. Consider not bothering flying and doing something different. And fashion, of course, being the other big, the big user. So give them some good concrete things that they can do. Make it personal, but start off with the facts.
Brilliant, thank you, Ben. That's a brilliant answer. I'm just going to ask Fiona now to step into the question. I think we talked a little bit about when Business Declares was founded last year in September, but maybe if you could answer some of those lovely questions that just give us a little bit of a flavour of how the organisation actually operates, how we run it, and whether or not we're affiliated with other declaring organisations. Over to you, Fiona.
Great, yes, well, we are a totally volunteer-based organisation, and therefore putting all the time in and funding ourselves in that sense. This organisation was really set up by myself, John Elkington, Kate Sandel, and Ben joined us very early on, and other people. Safia Mini was part of that. So we have a board of directors because we're a not-for-profit company, which felt appropriate given the idea that we want to influence business. And some of you may know that there was a letter written a year ago, last April, when the Extinction Rebellion protests were bringing London to a halt in a different sort of way. And there was a lot of bad press about business. So John and I spent our Easter writing a letter with Shami and Love from B-Lab UK, and had lots of support there from people like Paul Polman from Body Shop, from a range of senior people within business. And after that process, we decided we wanted this to be something. So that's how we managed to launch ourselves in September. So we have over 30 companies, and we do have a lot of people like Steve Waygood at Aviva, or Bevis Watts at Triodos, who are supporters and would say that they're already on the journey. They haven't necessarily gone back to their boards to declare because they feel they've done an awful lot already, and that might be their raison d'etre. So those supporters are behind us, and we're seeing ourselves having an influential role. And we've got a fantastic team of volunteers that we've attracted, and I'm just very grateful for that. But we're always grateful for more support, and we are linking up with the other declares movements. So culture declares, music declares, construction declares, tourism declares, and we see that as a very important message to keep, as I said earlier, doing this on a planetary emergency scale.
Brilliant.
So hope that helps cover some of that.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Thank you. And of course, anyone who wants to find out anything more about Business Declares, please do keep in touch with us. You can join our newsletter, you can follow us on social, and we'll give you some links to that later. Thank you so much to everyone who's been asking questions in the chat. I'm really conscious now that we have a real nice opportunity to harness some of the thinking that has been raised by our speakers and really digest it in sort of smaller groups. So I might be really cruel and move us away from the Q&A just so that we can get going on some of those breakout questions. I want to just say a big thank you again to our speakers tonight for sharing their stories. We'll try and share a little bit more information about them after the call, but thank you so much for being with us tonight. So if I ask Ellie to share the slide relating to the breakout discussions, I might just begin to talk us through what we hope to get from the next section. So what we'd really like to do now is, we know that this is a really broad topic. I think Ben gave a real flavour to just how wide and overarching some of the themes are that one might have to address if we were looking at making progress on this in our organisations. So what we've done is we've come up with some of what we think are the most kind of burning questions in this area. So questions like, what does it mean for my organisation to declare? What is the scope? And how do I go about it? How do I engage people? How do I build a climate emergency plan, and what even is one? How do I advocate for social and climate change? What does that look like? What are the barriers that I might face, and how do I overcome them? And how do I ensure that my organisation doesn't just declare and then not really do anything? So these are kind of 6 topics that we'd really love to explore. And what we're going to attempt to do now is assign everyone to a different virtual table. So for those of you who haven't used breakout rooms before in Zoom, what should happen is soon something's going to appear on your screen, which is going to be telling you about a breakout room that you've been invited to go to. Every room is going to have a host, and that host will lead you in a conversation. We'll then all come back after your discussions into the main plenary, and we'll get to hear a short summary from a volunteer from each group of what they've been discussing. So basically, I'm about to send you off for your discussion session, and we're going to meet back in the main centre at 7:10. So it's going to be a short discussion, but hopefully a really nice opportunity for you to focus on one of these questions. So I'm going to hand over to Rob, who I think is going to start assigning people to breakout rooms. You probably get a little notification on your screen saying that you're going to go, and I think you have to say yes, or yes, I join, and then you'll magically appear in a new breakout room with one of your lovely facilitators. They're also going to be potentially using some digital software with you, which will be like a little digital whiteboard where you'll be able to share your ideas and do some brainstorming together. I think when you get into your sessions, the facilitators are each going to share a link, and it may be that Rob actually puts the link into the chat now, just in case anyone wants to copy that and have that ready. So those of you who are on a laptop, you could open that. It's called a Jamboard. It's a virtual whiteboard. You could open that in another screen if you feel comfortable, but no need if it's a bit too complex. All right, so I'm going to wish you a really lovely roundtable discussion now as you go into your 6 rooms, and I look forward to seeing you back in the main room at 7:10. So thanks so much, guys, and enjoy your discussions.
Good evening, everyone. I think this hopefully should be our group, and there may be possibly 1 or 2 more to join. My name's Rob, and I'll be facilitating the room. What that means is hopefully very little. Hopefully I'll be very quiet in the background saying nothing. But just to kind of move the conversation along, I'm really looking forward to hearing kind of your collaborative thoughts together on a question that we've got posed to us, that we'll put together some ideas on some post-it notes, hopefully summarized by the end of it, and we'll bring that back to the wider group to kind of share what our messaging was. So I'll introduce you shortly to the Jamboard, which is going to be our tool to collaborate a little bit. But before we do that, I'm hoping that one of you is going to kindly volunteer to be the spokesperson back to the group. Don't all jump at once. Someone's got to do it.
Go on, Rob, I'll do it if you want.
Ah, Tom, good man. Excellent. Okay, so we probably have a few minutes, and it'd be quite useful just to do a quick round the room and introduce each other, just so we know where we're all from. I'll kick off. So my name's Rob. I'm one of the Business Declares volunteers.
So, shall I go next?
Yeah, Sophie, go.
Hi, I'm Sophie. I'm really sorry I have to leave in about 5 minutes, but I have just heard about this. I can't even remember how I heard about it, but I'm interested in learning more.
Excellent. Sandy, you want to kick off next?
Hi, Sandy. I am a volunteer for a charity called Empathy Action, particularly involved in Gifts That Give Twice and running simulations in schools. So thinking about how we can use this as a tool perhaps in the various settings that we work in.
Fantastic. Tom, we move to you.
Really sorry, our phone's going, which I have to answer.
No problem. We'll move to the other Tom.
Hi, sorry, me, Tom.
Yeah.
Sorry, my name's Tom. I'm an OnPurpose associate, currently placed with TerraCycle. And I'm really interested just to see what's going on in the space and how it can be done.
Excellent. Sophia?
Hi, I'm Sophia. I'm having pretty serious internet connectivity issues, so I won't show you my face because it'll be mostly pixelated. But I'm, like Tom, I'm a current OnPurpose associate, so I started in the April 2020 round. And although my placement isn't actually anything to do with sustainability, it's something that I've always been very interested in. I think business declares and the kind of whole thing is excellent. So very excited about this evening.
Great. Shuana, is that right?
Yeah, sure now. So hi everyone. I'm also from OnPurpose. Got quite a few in this breakout room. I'm in the same cohort as Tom, who just introduced himself. And yeah, I'm just pretty much new to this stuff, so just keen to learn from a starting position.
Fantastic. And Pilar? Pilar?
Hi, sorry, I'm having some issues with my internet as well, so apologies for the lack of image. I'm actually, I had a bit of an epiphany, a bit like Robert, and decided to study. So I'm studying part-time environmental management, and I came across this, so just wanted to kind of get an idea of what how's everyone taking action and how I could possibly do that.
Fantastic. So I think we've heard to everyone except Tom, but we'll let him crack on and then we'll move on from there. So has everyone got the link that I sent, which is the Jamboard link? If you could open that, I'll put it back in the chat for everyone if anyone needs it. If you could open up that, and I'm going to share my screen just for those that can't access it or need to see it. So I will just share it, so we've got that. And you should come to, hopefully, like a landing page. And what I'm going to do is move you over to our slide, which is slide 2. And that's our question. So what I'd love to hear you guys debate and discuss is, what does it mean for my organization to declare? What is in scope? And how do you execute that in a remote working environment? So really have a think about what's been talked about already in the room. What does it mean for my organization? Like the levels of commitment, the levels of engagement, winning over hearts and minds. What's in scope? Think about like the stakeholders, your employees, all that sort of thing. And hopefully, if you can see my screen, you should be able to use the sticky note function, which is up on the left, where you can type in notes here. So if we have an idea, what does it mean for my organization? So let's put in the level of commitment, and you can just post that there, and we see a more collaborative kind of approach to that board being produced. Does everyone see that?
Yeah.
Fantastic. So it would be great if I could leave you guys to kind of come up with some ideas and discuss and debate from your own experience or what you've heard from today.
Sorry, I have to go, but thank you very much.
No problem, Sophie.
Bye.
Bless you.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I thought I was still on mute.
Has anyone got any initial thoughts or ideas?
I was going to say perhaps overly obvious, but I know a lot of organizations are kind of pivoting their strategy in general at this point, just reacting to the circumstances and possibly building that in, kind of declaring a climate emergency into the kind of pivoting strategy. And as those conversations are being had, kind of layering that in might be a possible avenue.
Yeah.
take advantage of all the fluctuations that are happening anyway.
Sorry, I have a thought about the scope, which kind of just got raised in our earlier presentations, was in terms of influencing, I don't know, employee financial decisions and that kind of thing. Like the scope isn't restricted to day-to-day business. Would that be something to put forward? That it's essentially, your business is a network of individuals, and it's an opportunity to influence outside.
Yeah, I think you got that really strongly from Vanetta earlier, where she spent a lot of time trying to influence her staff, which in turn influences the people that they interact with, and like people that are outside of her scope. And that's the really positive message. So yeah, please add it to the board.
Yes, for me, I put the no going back decisive action. It does mean putting it to the top of the agenda, and a lot of the other things that we're working on, saying, okay, perhaps they move down for a bit and this needs to go to the top, and we need to look at what actions we really need to be taking.
Definitely. So some of the things, like in terms of the steps to declare, like for us, really, it's important that you're able to engage with board level or exec level to get sign off from the business. I mean, if you're a small business, it doesn't really matter. You have to be confident as an owner that it isn't a greenwashing statement. It's something you're committing to. And so that's part of the declaration. It's more just it's a commitment, really. And so that's one of the things you might want to consider is, what does it mean for my organization to declare? It's making a commitment. And it doesn't mean if you can't answer or do those things now, it might be, 12 months, 3 years from now, but by cementing a commitment with a target, it really helps.
I would also add that probably you need to, once you get kind of obviously the executive board on board, you do need everyone to kind of buy into it. So it needs to be an inclusive conversation, I would say, so that if you want to have the support, then you also need everyone else to buy into it as well.
Have you got any ideas how you might do that?
Haha, I think that's the $1 million question, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm going to add that in anyway. Any more thoughts on how else you might cement commitment for a declaration? Is it publicizing it? Is it engaging with your employees? Is there anything more that can be done?
I mean, using social media constructively seems to be important at this time.
Yeah.
Any kind of messaging that you can put out there. I mean, once you put it out, you're also kind of putting it out there and have to commit to it, aren't you? So it's a way of sharing it with your supporters and others, and encouraging, that we're talking about kind of vocalizing the positive actions. It's a way to add that.
Like that, vocalizing.
I'd probably add as well, there's something about, if you're making this commitment, you have to fully understand all of your own impact first. There's no point going into it and committing to it when you've got blind spots where you could potentially be having negative impact. I think you have to fully understand what's going on for your company before taking this step. And a part of that might be communicating that understanding to colleagues, which could be a part of the wider support, getting people on board. But yeah, I think there has to be a significant understanding of the impact the company is having before you can make a declaration like this.
Yeah, absolutely. You see that a lot with the SDG goals where you might achieve one but inadvertently destroy another because you're too kind of narrow focused on what you're thinking about?
Is there
Any other thoughts on what about scope? Like, think about, you know, whether you can influence your wider stakeholders, your suppliers. Is there any other influence with the government that you hadn't considered you have actually? Any other weights within particular sectors or industries? And also thinking about how far do you go? Do you compromise the profit of the business? Or are you not willing to do that? I mean, these are all, you know, things you have to consider.
With pensions and finance covered in that scope?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, is that your own pension? Is it the pension of your staff?
I imagine it being both, but as a company, you have a scale which an individual can't necessarily engage with when having that discussion.
Yeah, 100%. Anything similar to the pension line, you know, that's something a bit out there, which I like, and it's also very impactful.
I mean, can you just, again, depending on what your sort of profits are, I mean, you could fund political parties that actually care about this.
Yeah.
Like, probably in the same way that I presume fossil fuel companies lobby.
Great idea.
You could also look at all of your suppliers and then kind of decide on or base your contracts on how sustainable they actually are as well, and make sure that you work only with those suppliers that actually can commit as much as you can to the climate emergency.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything more from considering the kind of COVID-19 perspective? You know, do you think that this is holding back kind of these ideas and progress, or do you think there's an opportunity to take from people working from home? Any ideas on that?
I think there's a great opportunity now, because I think more than anything we've proven that a lot of work can be done from home. So you could cut on transportation, and also on travel by using these online tools like Zoom and stuff, and also mobilize sort of sharing. The concept of sharing, I think, will be an interesting one to explore after this.
What do you mean? Talk that through.
Well, I think what the emergence, what this pandemic has shown is that, you know, it doesn't affect everyone equally as much as they say that the virus itself doesn't discern. It's clear that it's not affecting everyone the same way. So this is why the government has had to do all of these different plans. So I think a lot of people are mobilizing more to raise money, you know, help each other out, etc. So I think a concept that could be maybe also translate into business and maybe working more collaboratively and working together, sharing resources.
Yeah, that's good. So.
It might be something about kind of brave new world visioning for your company, for your group. You know, what have we learned through this? What do we want to take forward? Is it that we want to do more remote working? Are there certain practices that we're engaging in now that we want to take forward? Or things that we'd like to try based on this experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put that down.
I was thinking on a sort of a more micro level, the fact that we're using Zoom and stuff like this to have discussions actually means that there's space for more people to join than would otherwise have been in the room. I've noticed on a couple of occasions, so I'm actually probably more connected with US colleagues than I would have been prior to this, for a sort of joined up thing. But also, like, I think Earth Day yesterday, you know, I was attending events around the world in a way which I probably would have gone around the corner if I was allowed around the corner. So I think that's a potential opportunity.
Also, to build on Tom's point there as well, a lot of the webinars are free, or they're, you know, like a peppercorn payment, because we're not paying for space to host conferences and sharing events like that. So they're far more affordable, so they're more accessible to people from an economic point of view as well.
Great point, yeah. Yeah, perfect. Well, I think we have to return now to the main room, but some really good stuff in there. So thank everyone, appreciate that. So we're gonna probably return now, I think. So you are welcome to return to the main session, and thank you for your input.
Thanks.
Everybody from your breakout sessions. It's lovely to have you back again. I've really been enjoying snooping in on the different Jamboards and seeing everything that's been going on in them. So thank you so much. Big thanks also to the facilitators for making that happen, and for everyone for juggling with the multiple tech. I found the Jamboard tools really useful in the past few weeks, just for brainstorming and things. So it's really lovely just to see all of your notes. All right, so what we're going to do now, as we all come back together in the main plenary session, is we're going to attempt to go on like a whistle-stop tour of the different Jamboards, just to see what each group has been talking about. I'm probably going to ask Ellie, who has been kindly sharing screen for us, just to take us on a little tour of those Jamboards. We're going to try and go through in order. So I think the first group was Rob's group on the first Jamboard in the list. So in a moment, when we're all back in plenary, we'll have a go at just seeing what everyone has been sharing. So thanks so much to all of you who've taken part in a group. If you were the host of a group, please could you share with me on the chat who is the volunteer who is speaking for you. First of all, we're going to go to Rob's group, and I think Tom is going to share with us a little 2-minute summary of everything that your group discussed. Ellie, if you're able to, it would be fantastic if you could share your screen, just so we could visit their Jamboard at the same time as Tom shares. So thanks so much. Over to you, Tom. Do you want to bring to life what you talked about when you answered the question, what does it mean for my organisation to declare, and what is the scope, and how do I execute that in the remote working situation? Thanks, Tom.
So I have an admission today that I was called away during our discussion to receive an internet shopping. So, so I think I could obviously read what's on the thing, but I think someone who's involved
maybe I'll let Rob jump in.
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. No, that's fair. I wasn't sure how much of you'd managed to catch in that. What I'll do is I'll summarize on behalf of the group for us. Well, we kind of broke the question down into 3 parts. So what does it mean for my organization to declare? I think we really wanted to understand about, you know, does that mean making a commitment, and by what level of commitment does that mean? So really that goes back to Ellie's steps to declare. Is it a board level? It's setting targets. It's also considering what kind of support are you looking for. You're being vocal, but are you looking for buy-in from your employers, from your customers, from your other stakeholders? But before all of that is to understand what your impact is. If you don't understand what your problem is, you can't really solve it, and there's no point talking about it. So it's better to avoid the adverse consequences of making decisions too early, which I could fully agree in it. That reflects on Ben's kind of comments around the scientific evidence and having that backed up. We then moved into kind of the scope. We had a really interesting point from Tom on pensions. You know, it's kind of talk the talk. Can you change the way in which your pensions provider sets up and be more ESG kind of like? Can you fund political parties to influence change? I thought that was really interesting. And obviously suppliers, you know, your wider stakeholders, what are the contractual obligations you have with them? How sustainable are they currently? So these were all really good things. And then we kind of moved into the, how do we achieve this in a kind of new environment, which actually was very positive. It was around webinars are more affordable, therefore more accessible. So we're able to reach a much wider audience than perhaps we were before. We can try new things. It's kind of that environment to try new things. There's this sense of community, collaborativeness, and helping. So I think that kind of helps unlock the ability to declare and make bolder statements. And we've realized we can do a lot from home, and just physically cutting down our travel. So I hope that summarizes some of the points there, but it just shows that there's many different avenues you can take when you want to declare.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, guys. That's really helpful. And I was just saying to Maria earlier, what we're going to try and do is take some screenshots of the brilliant notes that you've all taken on your Jamboards and maybe share those around as part of the pack in the post-event documents that we're going to share. Okay, so we're going to move now on to the second group, which I think was Beth's group, and Maria has kindly volunteered to summarise. So maybe Ellie could move us on. Thanks, Ellie, to your Jamboard. So Maria, I'd love you just to sum up what you really got from your discussion about how to engage people in the change, whether it's stakeholders and organisations, that could be staff, the board, and how you make this relevant in a time of emergency.
Yeah, great. So we started off looking and talking about kind of the challenge of talking about climate change when COVID-19 is so central to the discussion at the moment, and the sort of different ways of that you can frame it. So we looked at incentives around the kind of increase in nature that people are seeing, the reduction in pollution, both air and noise and those sorts of things, and framing the conversation in a what do you want a post-COVID-19 world to look like, and showing what a kind of a green economic recovery could look like, and putting that in a really kind of positive framing. And with COVID-19, we were really clear that timing is going to be really key in sort of keeping the positive changes that have happened during the crisis. There's going to be a really short window before we kind of do switch back to that business as usual behaviours, and how to look to galvanise people in that time. There was a lot about kind of looking at the behaviour changes, so making short-term sacrifices for long-term goals, and the realisation that lots of people aren't in businesses for a very long time, and that lots of businesses do have short-term goals that they need to meet, and looking at how what sacrifices can be made to sort of look beyond just the immediate business. One of the things that was really interesting that came out was the idea that a lot of the changes that are going to happen to people are going to be forced upon them, and they're going to come from top down. And actually it's a really important that part of the engagement is getting people to understand the climate emergency, to understand why those changes need to be made, so that they are less resistant to the change when it comes around, and they kind of embrace it. And then looking at kind of what could be done to influence decision makers, so that whether that's in a business or government, or both nationally or locally.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think there's some really rich ideas there, and I love that piece about when changes are inflicted on someone, how can you actually engage them in understanding the why. That's really nice. Thanks, Maria. Okay, so we're going to move on to Ellie's group now, and I think Ellie said that Lorna was happy to share some of the things that you guys discussed when you answered the question, what's involved in actually making a climate emergency plan, and how might this change with COVID-19. So if I've got that right, Lorna, are you happy to share?
Yeah, sure. So we looked at kind of two parts of this. plans that could be made to do with the kind of inside the organization things that you might have direct control of, and then moved on to looking at kind of beyond our organizations, how we could engage others. So started with some conversation about using smart targets, using a carbon audit, and talked about a few options for being able to do that. And then the kind of things that you might have already achieved through becoming B Corp, or the kind of affiliation with B Corp, and how that relationship worked. And then more kind of concretely looking at reducing travel, greening tech, greening finance, including pensions, and the changes that we've seen at the moment around kind of remote working, also being important parts of the plan. And then definitely kind of engaging the team as part of the plan, and making sure that the team and stakeholders are held to account. And then moving over into kind of supply chains, thinking about consumables and just generally how carbon impact can be reduced in the supply chains being used. And then over into kind of choosing who you work with, similar link to the supply chains there, and how you can advocate and educate, sharing resources, and making sure that you can share where possible to get others into the loop.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, and for that incredibly precise summary. Cheers, that's really nice. I really like that whole piece about like the role of an organisation, not only in sorting out its own stuff, getting its own house in order, but then thinking about actually how do you advocate through those supply chains, maybe with your clients by sharing resources and ideas. That's lovely. Okay, I think we're going to go to Fiona's group now, which is the Next Jamboard Long, and they were asking the question, so you know, how do we actually advocate for social and climate change, and what does that look like given the wider context of COVID-19?
So I think Helen and I might share this. Helen,
brilliant,
who's in Paris, agreed through chat that to do this. So do you want to kick off, Helen? I'll add in anything.
Yes, that's lovely. Thank you. So we had a wonderful conversation with various inputs. I think overall we all agreed that the COVID-19 really is connected with the larger ecological emergency, and people were sharing about on a personal level how they appreciate the silence as they are living near Heathrow. So that makes a clear difference. Other participants shared about how they had not filled up their fuel tank, they're not traveling, and they are really connecting with their clients, for example, through video, and they are considering, I believe, a change for good. So the scale of this human crisis is really affecting everyone. We spoke about that. Mm-hmm. And there is a shift in the mindset around how this affects everyone, kind of like a restart or a reset.
Yeah, I very much agree. And I think the only other key themes that came up were a little bit around there is an opportunity for the green economy now. And also we're talking about how that's been spoken about a lot in the EU, perhaps more than in the UK. And then climate justice as a theme around food and vulnerability and energy vulnerability if this carries on into the winter. And just that chance that people are in a perhaps more receptive space because of the level of compassion and humanity that's being shown. And that also we're often in denial. I love that statement. You can't read it very well, but people usually don't believe the dark predictions until they happen. Mm-hmm. So that's our summarize remarks.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Yeah, I think there's something really interesting there about perhaps when we entered this pandemic, a sense of not quite knowing whether this would be too hard to talk about, or actually whether it has helped to open certain streams of conversation that maybe would have been difficult to open before. So that's just something really interesting to notice. Okay, I'm going to take it over to Saf and Ronan's group now. And I think that's the next, yeah, exactly, brilliant. So what they really discussed was what are the barriers that we might face in bringing about change. So I'd love to hear from the volunteer for your group, guys, of who might be able to sum up and share some thoughts with us.
Hi, yeah, we said that I would present back. So there was a lot about a sort of personal and organizational sense of powerlessness, inertia, apathy, not our problems. So that, yeah, those could be personal attitudes or cultural. Then a lot about kind of on a leadership level, maybe it not being a priority of your organization, either now because of COVID or in general, but also a governmental or societal perception of apathy, so not just personally within your organization. Then this area at the bottom was more about the fact that there are resources out there, but we don't know where to turn to often for them. It seems like they're everywhere and we don't really know where to begin. At the same time, though, there is a lack of resources given the scale of the problem, certainly on a kind of legislative or governmental level. There's no legislation to make it a level playing field so that it's within businesses' interests to declare. And, you know, we probably don't have time to wait for everyone to make voluntary decisions. And then there were a couple of points. One was that normally we wait for government to act and us to follow, but this time it won't work. And also a comment about how it's hard to motivate yourself when you can't see the fruit of your individual labors. And I thought maybe they were connected in the sense that one of the barriers is that we need a new way of thinking. We need to think as communities, and that's a real paradigm shift. And then there was a final little point, if I understood it correctly, just that we need more of our consultancy services to be focused directly on this problem rather than what consultancy services are typically used for.
Excellent, thank you. That's great. Yeah, I think that's so interesting, this how do we shift to community-based thinking, and I think lots of organizations are learning about ways to do that. And on individual levels, I've definitely heard so much about different people feeling more connected in their local communities. So really interesting to see how that might influence how we change our thinking going forward. Okay, I think we've got one more group which Sam facilitated, which is the next Jambo along, and they were kind of answering the question, you know, it would be great if my organisation declared, but how do I make sure we don't just declare and then nothing happens? How do we make sure it doesn't just feel like it's kind of greenwash, or perhaps at the moment maybe it feels insensitive, or it's a kind of move to jump on a sort of bandwagon that lacks integrity? So I think this is a really interesting question. I think maybe Anna from that group has volunteered to share back some thoughts. So over to you if you're happy to give us a little rundown on what you discussed.
Sure. So what we said was, first of all, I think we mentioned that make it public ensures that, well, if we make it public, then that we have to deliver what we said. Also, we talked about being a role model from the top, and the fact that the senior management should be in the company should set the example. We also talked about to ensure that all employees are involved, that we should put it on the appraisals as an objective as well. And then we talk about that at the moment millennials are questioning also, you know, the fact that they're working from home and how they can be part of the business, and if it makes sense to be part of a business that doesn't share the same values as them. So it's again, it's important for the company to retain the talent and to share and make it public the values and the work that they want to move forward, and they take climate as an important step to take. Then we talked about the resilience, and that coming out of this crisis, it will show what are the businesses that have more resilience than others. And we talked about how important it is to
be authentic and show empathy. Also, in terms of we talked about some examples of some companies that contribute to facing the pandemic, that they contribute to the community, either by changing their production line. So for instance, some spirits company that change into their production into developing hand sanitizer, or financially helping financially. And this also helps them to get some PR. So ensuring that they kind of jump on the bandwagon, but with integrity, and that's kind of it.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you so much. And just a really big thank you to everyone for taking part in those Jamboards. They're a lovely resource for us all to have now, and like I say, we will be finding a way to share them, but also you have the link to them, and we'll keep that open for a few days just so that you can see everybody's notes. So thank you so much. Collective round of applause. I'm going to hand over to Fiona now, while we all just take a moment to think personally about everything we've heard this evening, perhaps about how it affects us and our organisations, and we really think about how to move into that action piece. So over to you, Fiona. And I think actually, Ellie, we can probably stop sharing screen for a moment and all just return to see each other in the gallery view. Thank you. Over to you, Fiona.
Wonderful. So I was really touched by what came up there, and I do feel that we're all learning a lot together. So I really love the fact that we were able to go into those breakout rooms, have a discussion and capture it, and much food for thought there from some brilliant ideas. But what we love to do, and I know it's a principle of Actionable, and I'm sure OnPurpose as well, is to close this kind of session by really encouraging people to take an action. And if you think about it, we'd just like to give you a moment now to think, so having heard what I've heard today, being stimulated in different ways, what's one way I could act either to influence the company I'm working with around declaring, or a personal action that you might want to take? So we'd love you to, we just give you maybe 30 seconds of peace and quiet, and then please, those who just like to get going, start sharing them in the chat. So we'd like you to write those down, and then we can see them in the chat in a moment.
And Fiona, I'm just going to add, for the Twitter savvy amongst you, if you also feel like tweeting your action with hashtag BizDeclares, that really helps us to create a visible outside ripple effect. So that could be also something to take forward.
Brilliant idea.
And that is BIZ declares. Thank you.
Yes, I'll put that on chat to just make it clear to everyone.
Thanks everyone. So really looking forward to hearing about the steps that you'd like to take and how you want to translate this into action. I know in the poll lots of you shared that you would really like to learn how to turn this great thinking into actions in your own organisation. So here's your chance. I think also that behaviour science proves that when we tell others we're going to do something, we're much more likely to do it. So consider the 46 people watching your chat now as your accountability buddies, who I'm sure are going to be on your case to see whether you did what you said you were going to. Lovely. So it's great hearing some of those come through now. So we've got Judith saying she's going to undertake a carbon audit. We've got others saying they're going to look at carbon neutral fashion methodology and start sharing it. Also amplifying the great work of OnPurpose as well as Business Declares, so with those hashtags. So you can use @OnPurpose UK, and you can also use @BizDeclares. Definitely amplifying and celebrating the work of others is a big part in how we bring about change. Fiona, a couple of really nice ones coming through if you want to share any of them.
Yeah, definitely. We've got a sense of more conscious lifestyles, but also that sense of setting up a working group for people from teams from Cody. I think that must be Sustrans, so we'd love to help you if there's any way we can help. And love to hear from Mari that she's going to write a climate emergency declaration and publish it within the next week. So wonderful.
Wow.
And
I just wanted to offer up as well, if anyone wants a continuing conversation to understand a bit more about Business Declares and look at maybe their organisation declaring, then you can always contact me as well, and we can chat it through one-on-one if that'd be helpful.
Thanks so much, Sam. Lovely. So please do keep those coming. To that point about next steps and where we go from here, I'm going to ask Ellie to share a slide which just gives people some useful links. But in the meantime, lots of things shared. So we've got Tom on Purpose saying they're going to get their carbon audit completed, moving pensions into green investments. We've got Wes saying that we need organisations to deliver on what they say. And how to kind of make that happen within your own organisation. More focus on driving behaviour change. There's so much there. Please do enjoy those. For anyone who does want to keep in touch with Business Declares, there's just a couple of links here. Feel free to screenshot that if that's useful for you, but we'll also share that round. And as Sam says, we're happy to work with you on an individual basis, running climate emergency workshops. And you can follow the work that we're doing on Twitter and LinkedIn and via our newsletter. One of the things that Rob is working on is some brilliant case studies, which we hope will really bring to life some of the great work that organisations in our network are doing and give you lots of examples that you can take back to the organisations that you work with. Loving seeing all the support coming through on the chat here for people's actions. So do just keep those coming. Thank you so much for having us. I'm wary of time and I want to make sure that everyone in the UK is able to attend the NHS clap. And I know that we've also got a lovely speaker here tonight that On Purpose just want to share with us, which is more on the theme of how can we take personal actions. So I just want to say a final thank you to me. So me, Ellie and Rob are volunteers working for Business Declares, and it's been really lovely to get to support tonight and meet all of you. And I've just really enjoyed this opportunity. I do a lot of freelance facilitation and I would never have believed that 60 people would have logged on tonight after such a sunny day for this conversation. It's just really inspired me that so many of you are so dedicated. So thank you so much. I don't know if you just want to say thanks from Business Declares, Fiona, before we hand back to Beth.
Yes, I'm completely delighted and very glad we've been able to be interactive in this way and have such brilliant thinking going on. And thank you very much to the team here who've made it happen, who are far more tech savvy than me. So thanks to Charlotte, Ellie, Rob, Sam and everyone, and Safia for giving us the time. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you so much. It isn't completely over. I want to let Charlotte pass over to Beth, I think it is next.
Yeah, go ahead, Beth.
Thanks, guys. And just to echo that, thank you to everyone at Business Declares for running this and for giving us the tools and the stimulus for thought for how we can act in our own organisations. It's been really inspiring and definitely very thought-provoking to have those rich discussions with you all. So thank you. Could I get the next slide, please? Before you all go off, I just wanted to, on the theme of taking action, and if you've enjoyed this workshop, there are a few other actions coming up, immediate things that you can do. So we have another actionable event happening next Thursday. It's another online event, and it's all on the theme of helping you helps me. So what we mean by that is that there's been a lot of research to show that helping others, getting involved in community initiatives has a really positive effect on mental well-being, and we're at a time where that's very needed across everybody, but also there are people in need who do need that support that we can offer. So the workshop really is we've got a great lineup of speakers, and we're gonna be guiding you through how you can identify first what motivates you, and then how you can look at and find community initiatives and stuff that you can get involved in your community to help out and to do some really good impactful work, but also to help yourself and to maintain that social connection that we all need. So if you're interested, there's some more details on this Ticket Pass website, and we can also send out some information in the email that follows this, I'm sure. It'd be great to see you there if you're around next week. Also would like to pass over to Make My Money Matter now to tell us about another tangible, concrete thing that we could all consider doing following this call. So over to you guys. Thank you.
Sure, and thanks so much for having me and welcoming me into this really interesting and inspiring conversation. So my name's David Heyman. I'm the campaign director at Make My Money Matter. And we are a campaign which is aiming to get members of the public to better align their personal finances with their values to drive more sustainable investment practice. And it's really exciting and interesting to hear lots of mentions of pensions on this call, because it's not normally the topic you hear talked about in sustainability forums or on conversations like this, but it's great that it's starting to get traction. Because our campaign is all based around the fact that moving your pension to a more sustainable option can have 27 times more impact and reducing your carbon footprint than giving up flying, becoming a vegan, and recycling combined. And we think this is a really interesting, exciting, and empowering thing for individuals and for organizations to think about in terms of their sustainability agenda. So look, I know we're kind of running short on time and everyone wants to be clapping this evening, which is fantastic. But just really quickly, what we're trying to do is run a campaign to mobilize and excite members of the public about the fact that we own collectively £3 trillion, which is invested on our behalf through our pensions, and that money can and should be directed to building a world we want to live in and a world we want to retire into, not one which is driven by kind of social or economic or climate catastrophe. And so we're going to focus on trying to put pressure on the pensions industry to better invest that money for people and planet, as well as profit for the investees. And so we're kind of doing three things this year. The first is a large-scale public campaign, which is trying to raise awareness of the fact that I mentioned earlier about the impact of pension investments, get people excited and empowered about the fact that we collectively own £3 trillion and can demand that does better for the environment and better for people. And so we'll be launching that campaign. It was due to launch this week. It's obviously being postponed, and we're going to look at doing that now in the autumn, but really to raise awareness, to get people talking and motivated about the power of our pensions. Secondly, really kind of relevant to this conversation, is we are signing up businesses to come on board, businesses, NGOs, local authorities, universities, to make commitments around their company pension schemes. As has been mentioned on this call, company pension schemes are oftentimes really misaligned with the values or the mission of the organizations they represent. And, you have the pensions of doctors and nurses, for example, is invested in tobacco, which is causing many of the diseases they treat. You have the pensions of teachers in the USA right now invested in gun manufacturers, which are used in school shootings. So there's a huge degree.
Oh, I think we might have just started to. Oh, here we go.
We slightly lost you there, David.
Sorry. I was just saying there's a real kind of significant misalignment between the organisational values or sustainability commitments many of us are making and organisations are making, and our pension schemes. And so we want people to be talking, when they talk about sustainability, not just supply chain or recycling or transport, but also about pensions. And then thirdly, we're kind of working on a government and industry advocacy agenda to push for better practice across the board, to get our pension investments invested more sustainably, more in line with our values and kind of ethics. So it's a really exciting campaign, and I think we're trying to focus on both the consumer angle, getting individuals to take action, to put pressure on their pension providers to do more and to offer better, more sustainable options, and also get businesses, NGOs, organisations signed up to commit to aligning their pension scheme with their organisational values and their mission. So we'll be kind of soft launching over the summer, and then we'll be doing more public activity towards the end of the year. But if anyone is interested and wants to find out more, my contact details are on here, and we'll be happy to continue the conversation.
Lovely stuff. Thank you so much, David. That's great. Okay, so I think that might be drawing our time together to a close. It's just so nice to hear a bit more about those pension details. We've got some really nice questions in the chat for you, David. Not sure if you've seen about the source location for some of the statistics you used, and lots of people hungry for great resources on this to share in their own work. So thank you very much.
Sure.
All right, so without further ado, I think it's probably time for us to say goodbye so that we can all get out there ready for our NHS clap. in a moment, it might just be nice for Ellie to stop sharing the screen so that we can all see each other, and perhaps turn our videos and our sound on. And I just really wanted to give everyone an opportunity to say thank you so much to each other in the room for all your honesty, all your ideas. I've been just so struck by all the brilliant questions people are up for asking. So thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to give you a clap, as well as all the clapping we're going to be doing later. But thank you so much. And it was just really lovely to spend this evening with you. And I just encourage everyone to take the questions, take the frustrations, take the energy, take the excitement and the hope, the thoughtfulness that you all have with you into your organisations, your work and your wider lives, so that we can channel some of this great energy into the actions that we want to see. So thank you all so much.
Thank you. Well done. Fantastic.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Charlotte, Rob and Ellie, brilliant job. Well done for hosting so well.
Thank you so much, guys. Have brilliant evenings, and please stay in touch. We'd love to hear what you get up to. Do let us know how you go with those pledges that you've made and the actions that you want to take going forward. And please be in touch if there are any ways that we can support you individually and organisationally.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
And cheers so much to our brilliant speakers and all of our volunteers who summed up so brilliantly. So thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Be safe.
Brilliant.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Stop the recording now. That's excellent. Thank you so much. Perfect.